Since October 7th, all of us have been in awe at the self-sacrifice of the many soldiers who are standing at the front lines, defending our homeland, defending the Jewish people. Tragically, we've also read time and time again of the soldiers who've been ripped away from their families at too young of an age. The devastation is overwhelming. How do we properly memorialize so many people? It's too much. The Orthodox Union started an initiative called B'yachad Lanetzach to demonstrate to those in Israel that we are together, we are B'yachad, we're with you, we're thinking of you, Lanetzach, and we're going to memorialize these soldiers forever. The 3 weeks is a time that we try to rectify the disharmony that broke the Jewish people, that ripped us apart. And so specifically during this time, we're going to be reaching out to different shuls, to different leaders of the shuls to find out from them what they did, how they connected to their soldier, how they brought more unity to the Jewish people, and how they're bringing comfort to the family of their bereaved soldier.
Thank you, Rabbi Hauer, for taking time from your exceptionally busy schedule to discuss with us a little bit about B'yachad Lanetzach, this incredible initiative of the OU. We've been meeting with different shul leaders talking about what they did in their shuls. Over 250, probably at this point, about 275 different institutions took part in B'yachad Lanetzach. And I was hoping that maybe you could take us behind the scenes and help us understand the catalyst behind starting this incredibly moving initiative of connecting shuls and institutions with bereaved families, with the soldiers who we've lost. Can you help us understand why the OU did this? And it wasn't a small decision. It took a significant amount of time, significant amount of personnel. It was quite costly. Why did the OU engage in this project?
Thank you for everything that you're doing. It's beautiful and it's essential. And let's talk about essential. The Jewish people are in the middle of a war in Eretz Yisrael. It's not a war for Israelis. It's not a war for Israeli soldiers. It's a war for the Jewish people, for every Jewish person living in Eretz Yisrael and for every Jew around the world. Right now, the center of gravity, appropriately, of the Jewish people is Eretz Yisrael, Medinas Yisrael, the state of Israel. That's the center stage of where Jewish life is being lived, where the critical mass, not quite yet the majority, but teasing awfully close to the majority of Klal Yisrael, living there in Eretz Yisrael. And of course, because it is our homeland, because it is the land of our avos, because it is the land where Hashem had demonstrated to us and to the world, Netzach Yisrael, the eternity and the fulfillment of his promise. The defense of Eretz Yisrael is a war upon all of us, and yet not all of us are in it, not all of us are fighting it. The Jewish people cannot be different worlds. We all know, we understand, there are quote-unquote different tribes. We speak about different tribes, and there's variation, and there's difference. And so it needs to be. So it needs to be. It was like that since the beginning of time. But there's a difference between tribes who are part of one nation, between tribes who have their own way but interact and understand and connect and relate to each other, and where it divides in ways that create a separation of experience, a separation of empathy, a separation of connection that's just not manageable. You asked where this project started. And the truth is, and you remember it because I said it to you at the very beginning of this war, right after October 7th, we had a chizuk call with RA Frankl, and she made a point on that call to speak about how much strength she gained from the world that knew who she was. Because during those weeks in June, years ago, everyone in the Jewish people who was engaged in being part of Klal Yisrael knew about those 3 boys, and their mothers had instant recognition. And so she was connected to everybody, and she just pointed out that here we had October 7th. At that time, we didn't even have a casualty count, but now we know the casualty count on that day alone was 1,200 killed, hundreds, 250 taken hostage. Since then, in the ground war, I think, there are 331 soldiers who have died. The numbers don't lend themselves to individual connection. And so, like the question became, the unspoken question, which she asked, will people be lost in the crowd? Will there be that individual connection. And we immediately talked about this and said, so like, this is our task. There's no way that we'll be able to elevate 1,200 people at that point in time to the nation as individuals, but we can connect one to one, one to one. We had a slogan at that time. I don't know if it's still a part of it at all, but we called it divide and remember. We will not be able to remember them as a mass. We'll remember the mass, of course. We'll remember the war, but there are families who are grieving over their individual gifts to the future of the Jewish people, the losses which they suffered because they gave their children, or they gave their spouse, or they gave their father to the cause of Klal Yisrael. And the least that we can do is give them the strength to understand that it's not just their individual loss, but that the Jewish people see it as what they've given to the Jewish people. And that could be achieved at individual communities, remembering one at a time, sort of like the Elef Lamata, which we speak about, and there have been many beautiful initiatives about pairing individual soldiers with people who will pray for them. Here we're pairing communities with people who will remember those who gave their lives, so it's understood that it is a korban tzibur. It was an offering on behalf of the nation of the Jewish people. And if we are, quote unquote, sitting here, your brothers are going to war, and you're sitting here, and that's a question for itself. But we have to everything we can to offer strength, to offer connection, and to make those who have given such a gift for the future of the Jewish people understand that it's recognized, and that their child will not be forgotten, will not be one of a number.
That vision that you mentioned of RA Frankl, really, I've seen in speaking to people, really come to fruition. I've heard from individuals who have reached out to these families who are not well known. They're not the charismatic individuals who are perhaps on podcasts, but just people who unfortunately lost a child or lost a spouse. And the first way, like, why are you calling me? Like, what do you want from me? Like, they just couldn't understand. And the response was, we're one family, we're one people, and we're so indebted to you. And it's just been incredible in terms of the family recognizing that we're really thinking about their child, their spouse, and it really has made that impact. I'm curious, perhaps more of a philosophical question. We have a lot of literature about how we think about different individuals in our communities. Let's say Torah scholars, Talmidei Chachamim. There's a whole set of laws about how we think about them, how we interact with them. How should we, as Jews, look at, perceive, think about the soldiers of the IDF?
I love the way you framed the question. There's a whole literature there about certain things, about Talmidei Chachamim, etc. There isn't a whole literature about soldiers, but there is enough. There is enough. The classic source, which was famously noted by Rav Chaim Shmulevitz in 1973, in the days after the Yom Kippur War broke out, where Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, who was a Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir Yeshiva, and gave a whole series of talks to his students with a sense of incredibly powerful empathy and appreciation for the soldiers who were fighting that very serious battle at that time. He invoked the story in the Gemara of Pappus Velulianos, who were two young men who gave their lives to save the Jewish community. It wasn't that they weren't soldiers. They weren't soldiers in the classic sense. There was a libel about someone who was killed, I think a princess who was killed, and they were ready to cast blame on the entire Jewish community and harm the Jewish community. And these two people stepped forward and said it was us. It wasn't them, but they stepped forward and said it was us. And in that way, they spared the Jewish community. And the Gemara says about them that Ein Kol Beria Yechola Lamod B'mechitzasam, that their portion in heaven is unrivaled. Nobody else could enter there. They gave their lives for the Jewish people. Now, by virtue of their names, Pappus Velulianos, which are very like Greek, Greco-Roman influenced names, one can assume that they probably were not, sitting in the Beis Medrash with Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Ishmael. They were people who, however, gave their lives for the sake of preserving the Jewish people. And Rav Chaim Shmulevitz said, that's the paradigm. That's the paradigm. That they are people who, like the soldiers of Tzal, who put their lives on their line and who give their lives in order to be able to save the Jewish people. And for that, we say that they are on the highest level in heaven. First of all, I want to say one technical point, and then one broader point. The technical point is you could say, okay, so let's just celebrate the ones who died because they're in heaven in this incredibly special, sacred place. But what about the rest of them? What are those who, thank God, are walking and doing their thing and at someplace eating a hamburger that somebody flipped for them, because they care for the soldiers. But we have a significant tradition that every person, when they say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, on a regular daily basis, they're supposed to say it with a kavana, with an intent that they're ready to give their lives for the Jewish people. And a readiness to give one's life for the Jewish people is like Kiddush Hashem. It is akin to giving one life to the Jewish people. And Rabbi Motzen, as you know, there's a way higher level of readiness to give. Me sitting in my comfortable seat in shul and putting my hand over my eyes and saying, if theoretically it would come to pass, I'd be ready to give my life for God and be Moser Nefesh. A person who puts on the combat fatigues and goes in an APC and rides into Rafiach or into Aza or into whatever else it is, has their head poking out of that APC to scout out the area around. That's real readiness. Before I say Kriya Shema, I don't write a letter to my family. Right before these soldiers go out to battle, they write a letter to their families, and therefore they have already earned that place. They have already earned that place. That's number one. Number two, as religious people, we know that across the religious spectrum, including religious Zionism, not just, so to speak, the anti-Zionist group, there was always a tension around what are the values of the Jewish people? Do we define ourselves by our religious commitment, or are we seeking to become as a nation? The Zionist movement was about becoming a nation, and many times people spoke disparagingly about we're going to be like all the other nations, Nia Kachol Hagoyim, and you're putting aside Torah. And it's true, of course, absolutely. As Sadia Goyen said, the Jewish people are a nation defined by our Torah, but we are a nation. We are a nation defined by our Torah, but we are a nation. And being a nation means that you have a mindset. We as Jews have a mindset not just about ourselves and our own well-being, or even our own spiritual growth, even the little carve-out place that we hope to have for ourselves in a world to come of benefiting from our spiritual growth, but we think in terms of what we're doing for our people. We wake up in the morning thinking in terms, that's the way we're supposed to do it. That's the way we're supposed to live. And that's the way we should look at these young men and women, people who are putting themselves in that place to give their lives for the Jewish people, to vie for a role that matters. People don't get dragged to fight in combat. If they're dragged to the army, so then they end up in a desk job someplace. To be in a combat unit, it's because they seek to do it. They want to do it. And that's the ethos, is because they want to do something for their people. They want to play a significant role to preserve and to strengthen their people. And that's an intention and a value that we in Chutz La'aretz, we outside of Israel, just simply don't have and have to admire and recognize.
Rabbi Hauer, you have a unique ability to bridge different communities, to be able to reach beyond the aisle, so to speak, in different directions. And specifically when it came to this project of B'yachad Lanetzach, of trying to memorialize the soldiers, I know you engaged in some outreach, trying to ensure that a broader part of the Jewish community would engage in memorializing the soldiers. I'm wondering if you could share with us a little bit of what you did and what the reception was to that outreach.
As we said at the outset, the tribes of the Jewish people cannot afford, we as Klal Yisrael cannot afford to be functioning in parallel universes. We have to be in one world. We have to know what each other are experiencing And even as we do different things and choose different paths, but we have to connect to the challenges that each one has. When I say this, please understand, I'm not making moral value calls or anything else. It's just, this is, compare what this one is doing to what that one is doing. That is not the direction in which this comment is made whatsoever, and nothing should be inferred from it one way or the other about it. It's just simply, we have to be nosei ba'ol im chavero. We have to appreciate what the other person is going through. And today, the yoke, the burden of the soldiers and of their families, the ones who Lo Aleinu have given their lives, and the ones who don't, but who are putting their lives on the line, who their families are waiting by the door, that yoke is so heavy, it is so intense, it is so profound, it's so different than it was for so many people in the past. I think it's well known that people don't knock on their neighbors' doors anymore. If they need to borrow a cup of sugar, they text them, because heaven forbid, those who come to bring difficult tidings, when that has to happen, they knock on the door, and they don't want people's hearts to stop even for a second. Living like that, it's so difficult. That yoke is extremely, extremely heavy, and all of us who again are dependent on these people who are fighting for all of us must be cognizant of that, must share in that. That's fundamental. That's basic. It's basic, and it's not, we don't fulfill it by writing a check for whatever and sending pizzas. We have to feel it. We have to feel it, miyom liyom, miyom liyom. And that's a message which we tried to share. We shared it specifically around Yom HaZikaron, which, there are parts of the Jewish people which didn't celebrate it. Frankly, even in the religious Zionist community in the United States, Yom HaZikaron was a token, okay, come early for the Yom HaAtzmaut celebration tonight, and we're going to daven mincha, and we'll say Akel Molei Rachmim, and then go on. It wasn't like it is in Israel, amongst those who commemorate it there. And then there are those who don't engage at all in the special commemorative days, Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, for whatever reasons. They haven't done it for 76 years, and they're not starting to do it now in that sense. But to pause for a second and say, okay, so maybe you didn't like a Memorial Day for soldiers that resembled military parades and things like that, but today, think about the families who today are revisiting grief that really, at this point, it's not even revisiting. It's just a day when it's so pronounced, and share and show and be a part of it. And so I wrote something which was widely circulated in significant, Mishpacha magazine published it, and it went out to its constituency, to its world. I attended a siyum, which we had encouraged in a shul in New York City, which was attended by Hasidim from Williamsburg, members of the Syrian community from Flatbush and from Deal, New Jersey, and members of every part of the Jewish community together, marking Yom HaZikaron, remembering a specific soldier. And I again, for some of the people in that room, it was a little disorienting. They needed to sort through some things, and I actually spoke privately with some, but to help them work it through. But it was meaningful, and it was embraced, and it was, hey, something. This is connection, and connection seems right. And I would say, I only, it was from that article in Mishpacha, I heard from many people, I only got a positive reaction and appreciation because of a core principle, which we know, which is that the Jewish people want to be together, and they appreciate being together, and they appreciate connecting with each other. And when you connect people to what we want and what we like and what we recognize, only good comes from it.
I think you gave people permission or a framework to think about the soldiers in a way that was not the typical model. For some, Yom HaZikaron is not going to work, but like you said, so many people are just bursting with a sense of recognition and gratitude and a feeling of connection. Giving them another framework was something that they were able to connect to.
And your support has been critical in making all of these things happen, as well as others all on our team at the OU. And just the understanding that it gets us nowhere to attack a different approach within the Jewish people. And nobody's ready to do radical, transformative change of their approach. By being inviting and encouraging, we are able to stimulate the incremental change, which is going to bring us closer together. And with Hashem's help and with our courage and strength and focus, lead us towards healing this sinas chinam thing, this hatred or this experience of living in separate worlds that has done us in for a long time and that we must fix.
Thank you so much for your time, for joining us.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you for your interest and for your time. And Bezrat Hashem, we will see this to a positive completion with Shalom al Yisrael from inside and out. Thank you.